this comes from Hearthstone years back, where there was an adventure setting that you played your deck of cards against another deck, but instead of it being like another person you were playing against in the adventure, like an NPC, it was a trap. Like it was a trap room was what you had to beat. And I thought to myself, wouldn't that be interesting if in D&D the boss monster at the end of a dungeon wasn't a boss monster, it was just a trap, like one large intricate trap or series of traps that you had to beat in some way.
Okay, like Indiana Jones style.
Yeah, so my question to you is, and I probably should have asked you this ahead of time because it's a really weird question, but how would you make a trap or a series of trap or that concept the boss at the end of a dungeon, like, and make that interesting in the same way like a boss monster is?
So I already have grief with traps in dungeons because
Yeah.
it's like, one, why is this trap here? Who's it trapping from? What's the purpose? What's it serving?
Yes.
Why would a bunch of priests put falling tiles that would anyone who's entering would step through and die? Like it's just like it doesn't always make sense and breaks the immersion.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be something like I don't know, someone is sadistically trying to get people to go to this dungeon for a very specific purpose. Either they're trying to like subjugate them, kidnap them, or they just like the idea of hiding treasure and then only the best adventurers get it. You know, like there has to be like
Yeah.
some reason why it's trapped. So under those assumptions,
Yeah, and I'll expound a little bit. It sounds like we got some people's interest, but they want to clarify a little bit. James, skill check boss encounter. Yeah, that could be great. I am a fan of skill checks when the or skill challenges when they're done right. Hold this crit says, are you talking traps or like a puzzle? It might be a combination of the two, but I think we want hit points involved. We want it to feel like combat, not just a big trap that's taking your hit points and then see who if you have all the hit points at the end. Like I want it to be like you are fighting things, but they are traps. So they reveal themselves, and maybe like there's a swinging thing with maces, and you got to get close. But people could try ranged attacks, but maybe there's a certain way to defeat the different parts of the trap. And maybe you don't have to defeat them all, but there's like certain treasure you won't get if you don't defeat them in a certain amount of time. Like the treasure chest that's like sinking down into acid or something. Like you gotta, I don't know, but I want hit points, and like I want it to feel like combat, but it's not a monster. It's like a series of traps or constructs. Maybe Timothy says like it makes me think of Arcade from X-Men or Squid Game. Arcade is a great example where he builds just like trap scenarios that and he puts the X-Men through them, like see if you can survive. That's kind of the feel of this concept.
I see this as like high stakes Willy Wonka.
Yeah, that's another way to go about it. High stakes Willy Wonka. Yeah, so Bob agrees, like requiring a number of successes, like a skill challenge. That's one way to do it. A self-building trap construct. That's an interesting concept. Maybe the trap built itself. Like it's
a
yeah.
sentient item. There's like an evil spirit possessing this thing that like creates itself or like reforms itself.
Yeah, the living trap, it's kind of like a trap gauntlet. Yeah, and so you even could get into like maybe it's nanobots sort of stuff, you know, that kind of like this room is made up of things. Or maybe the traps are okay. So Dungeon Dad did a video about moon rats that are like these rats that become geniuses on a full moon. What if it's a bunch of rats who they're only geniuses for a night and they have a stash of stuff. I'm loving this now, okay? But they know they're gonna be dumb when the moon goes away. They're gonna go back to being rats, but they want to keep their stash. So in a night, when they're geniuses, they make this room full of traps or like these construct like trap things to guard their loot, their booty. I like this.
This is like in Death Note when Light. I don't want to make this any spoilers for Death Note,
like that.
But so plug your ears if you're still interested in Death Note and haven't seen it yet. This is like in Death Note when Light intentionally loses his memory so that he doesn't incriminate himself, but he sets up fallback plans in order to get his Death Note and memories back. That's an interesting concept, though. If you had a boss who maybe he has to go through the dungeon himself as like an NPC, and he doesn't realize until the end when he regains power or memories or whatever that he set this thing up for himself so that he can get the reward at a particular time that aligns with some cosmic event happening. That would be a lot of mind messing with players.
Yeah, so I think we've got some strong concepts, and I liked that people brought up like Arcade, Squid Game, and Willy Wonka, because I didn't think of like some other examples other than just like Indiana Jones, like stuff like that. So I'm glad we have some different examples. Mechanically, how would it work? It might work like a skill challenge, but maybe you put hit points on things so that it feels like more of a combat than a skill challenge, just to switch things up a little bit.
My experience is that players will always try to circumvent anything that you put in front of them that's like a puzzle. So I think it should just be like, you have a problem to solve. There is not one specific way to solve this problem. The players have to figure out how to solve the problem. So skill checks, I think it just has to be more open-ended of like, yeah, you could roll an acrobatics, you could roll a strength check. You know, like leave it more open ended as a DM. Just say this is the problem. Whatever you decide, it could work.
Oh, and you know what else? You could have it be a two-parter. Let's say there's a boss who's in like this big jar and there's like some sacrificial blood being dripped into it. Going to become more powerful. They're going to like morph into something else. When it's full of blood and it becomes like red, you don't even see them anymore, and then all of a sudden the glass will burst. So the goal becomes you don't want as difficult of a boss, so you have to get past all the traps that are guarding this ritual, and the faster you get through them, the easier you're going to be able to slice through this guy who's going to transform into some elder god. I don't know. There's two parts. So there's like the trap boss, and then there's the boss. So you need to beat the trap boss as fast as possible to make the boss not just be immune to all damage or something crazy like that.
I also like what James is saying. Like, if you've got someone who's transforming into a lich and their phylactery, like there's a certain amount of time required to transform into a lich. Imagine that there's a lich's like a minion or something helping the process go along. But if the lich is by himself and he's like, okay, I'm setting this in action, now I have to die so that my phylactery can by itself, using mechanical traps or something, you know, get me to that point. That could be an interesting way too.
I'm thinking of, I once did a bit of a dungeon where there was like 20 different challenges, and each one was based on a Pokemon. So like there was one that was based on Donphan, which is like armadillo style, like rolling like a wheel, like a ball. And it was like unstoppable. They couldn't stop it. So one of the players had to ready in action their shield like a ramp and knock it up into the air so it would lose its momentum and be exposed. And then they were able to defeat it. And so like stuff like that could be fun as long as you don't seem unfair and you're not womping on the players with hidden mechanics where it's like, why is this thing immune? How do we stop it? You know, and you make it clear that like use your head, you know, like cue the players. I think if you do that, it'll wake up players to not just think like mechanically of like, how do I just hit this with an axe? But how would I like critically analyze this and try to problem solve it? I think that's what I would want out of this.
I really like what Warren says here. If you've got this big bad monster underneath like a grating, it's dangerous for yourself to go feed it. You try to lure adventurers to go and die with treasure in order to feed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that as well. Maybe the reason for Trap Gauntlet is pure entertainment. Yeah, maybe it is like that arcade concept or like Jigsaw. So it could be broadcasted. Yeah, so yeah, maybe they're okay. Now we're getting this like Squid Game stuff. Maybe they're projecting it, you know, with
social experiments.
They're using some illusion magic because like the 7th level project image spell goes like 500 miles and like projects an image of you. What if they made it so the room is projected like within 500 miles and a bunch of rich oligarchs are like just watching you fight for your lives, and then later on the players have to find out who those people were that were, you know, funding that thing, because you know nothing makes your players madder than being put into some danger room scenario to dance for someone else, you know. So that could be a fun thing to explore as well. Instead of a Coliseum fight, it's a Coliseum trap gauntlet. Yeah, exactly.
That's Willy Wonka, baby.
That's Willy Wonka, baby. Yeah. Just a bunch of scrying and arcane eye in the dungeon. Yeah, like stuff like that. Remember, dwarves and gnomes, put the safety in the trap at kneecap height. Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah. I don't know how we would. I think everyone's answer would be differently with how would you mechanically pay this off. But hopefully the concept is something that creatively tickled your noggin, I guess.